Greetings, everybody, and welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. Well, it's pretty late here now, but we're going to do this video anyways. So it's my Wednesday night favorites, which is a show I do every Wednesday night. I pick some category. It could be a top 5, or it could be a top 20, or it might be a 25. I recently did a top 30 as well. I did some rankings on here. I did some alternating kind of videos. So I try to make it interesting. The lists, I try to make different types of lists. That's basically what it is. So today I'm going to do, this is going to be the first of kind of two videos that kind of go together. So this one will be titled 5 albums that I didn't like, but I grew to like them over time. I wanted to do something like this because I have a lot of albums like this that, for whatever reason, I really didn't get into them. There's a little story behind each of them. So I tried to choose 5 albums that have a bit of a story behind them so that make it a little bit more interesting. And so we're going to do this one, and then next week we're going to do the reverse, and we'll get into that when we get to the end. So they're not in any particular order. They're not ranked or anything like that. There's no, this is my worst and this is my best and this is that. There's none of that here. Just 5 albums that I disliked when they first came to be known to me, and I later grew to love them, or they became among my favorite albums. So today we're going to start with the first one. It's a debut album by this band, and I know people are going to find it hard to believe I didn't like this album at first, but there's a story, and I'm going to tell that story. This is Boston's debut album, or debut album, I guess that's what you would call it. I think it sold about 17 million copies by this time. This is a particularly nice one as well. It's got a nice inside yellow album cover. So, a little story about it. So, how the story goes is that, and some of you have heard this by listening to other videos that I've made, but in 1976, it was Christmas time, and I had asked for Kiss's Destroyer for Christmas. I was really excited that I might get this album. I wanted it. I had a couple of Kiss albums at the time, Kiss Alive, and I believe the other one, I think the other one might have been Harder Than Hell. I can't remember, but I had Kiss Alive, I know that. And I had asked for Kiss's Destroyer for Christmas. And when I got up in the morning, I looked under the tree and there was an album wrapped on my section. I thought, I'm going to get it. I was so excited. And my parents said, okay, which gift do you want first? Of course, I picked that one right away. And I opened it, and out came this album. And I don't know how I contained my emotions. I was so disappointed, but I knew if I said anything, my dad would lose it. So I didn't. I kept it to myself. I took all the rest of my, I don't even remember what else I got. That's how upset I was. I don't remember anything else. And I took this album and I stuck it in the closet with my vinyl collection, which wasn't very big at the time. There might have been 3 or 4 albums there. I didn't even open it. I just threw it in there. I didn't care. I knew I couldn't throw it out because they would lose it if they saw it in the garbage. So I just threw it back there and forgot about it. And I went on to do other things. And eventually I got over my anger. And a couple of years went by and we're moving into an apartment. My mother, my sister, and me, because my dad was no longer in the picture. And I was bringing my album collection. By then it was probably up around maybe 25 or 30 albums. About good half of them were Kiss albums, and the other ones were ones given to me by people, and those old K-Tel specials had a couple of those too. And so anyways, I was putting my stuff away, and I started looking for an album to play, and I seen one that wasn't open. I said, why isn't that one open? So I took it out, and I looked at it and said, this album. I said, oh yeah, this one that I hated. But I had heard More Than a Feeling on the radio. I thought, that's a good song. Maybe there's something else that's good on it. So I started playing it. And of course, like most people, I only played the first side of the album, which had More Than a Feeling, Peace of Mind, and Foreplay Long Time. And I liked all three of these tunes, but that's all I played 4 years. I'm going to say probably into the 90s. So, but at that point, I no longer even had the album anymore. I had given it away to my sister. And so one time I was out buying a bunch of albums, and this one was on sale, so I bought it again. I said, I might as well have it again. I bought it, and I bought the other Boston album, Don't Look Back, as well. And then I said, well, I've listened to all these tracks so many times. Let's try flip it over. And then I flipped it over, and to my surprise, I liked the stuff on the other side even more. You know. And now I love this album. There's no bad tracks on this album, in my opinion. Hitch a Ride, great tune. Smokin', of course. Something About You. Let Me Take You Home Tonight. It's just great stuff. The album is just littered with wonderful music, and I've come to love this album. Pretty much the album I go to for Boston, and I think that I'm not alone in this. A lot of people have. So Boston, that's the story about how Boston became an album I hated at the beginning, not through anything of its own right, but I grew to love it in the end when I started actually listening to it. The next one up, kind of a similar situation. The only difference between this one is that I never owned it. I refused to own it. I hated this group. I didn't like anything about them. I thought they were boring as hell. And my friend had this album, and I thought this was a crap album. The Doors. Hated it. And why would anybody listen to this Bon Tepi keyboards? Like really strange music. I didn't like any of it. I didn't think any of it was good. It didn't make any sense to me. And then a couple of years ago, I was out yard sailing, which I like to do. Saw a box of records. And I looked in, there was this and a few other stuff in there. This I wouldn't care about. There was some other stuff in there I liked, and I thought, the lady was asking like a quarter for every album, whatever it was. And so I said, there was like 30 or 40 CDs in here, and I said to the lady, I'll give you $20 for the whole bunch. So I did. I gave her $20, took all the albums home. It's actually turned out to be about 37 or 38 albums in there. Many of which I never kept. I got rid of them, or I kept the cases because it's good because some of my cases break. But all 6 or 5 of the 6 Doors albums were in here, and I thought, oh well, I got them for nothing, so pretty much next for nothing. So I took them all, and I decided, okay, well, might as well give it a chance. And I started listening to this one first because it was the first one, and at first I did, and I said, oh, this is going to be tough. And then I put it in my playlist because then it'll get a regular play, and I don't have to think about looking for it or trying to listen to it. And I would play it when its turn came up. And then by about the 4th time, I was thinking, you know what? I don't mind this. This is actually not too bad. By the end of the time I took it off the playlist, I was actually listening to it all the time, liking it so much. I don't know, maybe just my taste, or maybe I was hearing things I didn't hear before. I don't know what it was, but I grew to love this album. And now I realized there's just every song on here is so good. Break On Through, which is a song I already knew. 20th Century Fox, great track. I love it. Light My Fire, of course, is another song. This album is proliferated with songs, radio songs, and just so many good things on here. End of the Night, just fantastic. Yep. And now I love this album. I don't know if that'll translate into the other Doors albums. I'm going through the second one now. I kind of like that one too. Not as much as this one. This one is just fantastic. So that's my story about the Doors. Third album up. This was my least favorite from this band. And I actually didn't own it on vinyl. I had their second album. I had their first album. I had In Through the Outdoor, and I'm giving it away now. Led Zeppelin 3. Didn't like it because it didn't seem like a Led Zeppelin album. It wasn't heavy. It didn't have really hard drumming or really strong guitar soloing. There wasn't any of those big, fast-paced, heavy songs that you got on Zeppelin 1 and 2 and In Through the Outdoor and Led Zeppelin 4. This was just kind of very acoustic sounding. It's much mellower, and I thought, nah, it's crap. And then I started to like, there was one tune on here that I liked. Of course, we all know that it was, where is it? Of course, the title track, or the first track, The Immigrant Song. It was the only song on it I liked. The rest of it, to me, was a waste of good vinyl, and in this case, CD. But over time, I started liking Boneyard Stomp. I started liking Since I've Been Loving You, Gallows Pole, of course, Out of the Tiles. Pretty soon, I'm loving all of the stuff on this album. So much so that this is now my favorite Led Zeppelin album, and it's the only Led Zeppelin album for me that is a masterpiece. I gave it masterpiece status last year. It's my favorite Zeppelin album. All from those humble beginnings where I only liked the one track Immigrant Song, and that was it. So that's my Led Zeppelin story. The next two, a little bit different story. So this one, Jethro Tull's Aqualung. I did not like this. And to be honest with you, in fairness to it, I did not listen to this. I listened to the one track, Aqualung, which I hated. I thought that's a stupid song, and it didn't make any sense. I don't want to hear it. It's kind of a weird, different type of tune, and I just found this band to be different and weird, and so I didn't want anything to do with this or the album, and I never bought it. And then maybe 30 years ago, when I was on this big shopping spree where I bought over $300 worth of CDs, this one was $2, and I said, nah, I'll take it, even though I don't really like it, just because the artwork is nice. And then I liked, the first track that I kind of liked on this album was Locomotive Breath, of course. I'd heard that before, so I knew that I would like that. It was the only Jethro Tull song at that point that I liked. And then I started liking some of the other stuff, like Mother Goose. I thought, this is a great song. Cross-Eyed Mary, another great song. My God, that's fantastic. Wind Up. That became my favorite song on the album. And then I started actually kind of liking Aqualung. And this is the way it kind of went with me. But it wasn't a buy the album, gradually start to listen to it. It took years. Because I wasn't into Jethro Tull. I bought this album in the 80s, and I didn't even actually listen to this album first. I listened to my Masters, which was a collection of all their stuff, and I started to like that one. Then I thought, okay, well then, if I like that one, maybe some of this stuff I'll like too. That's where it started. But it took about 3 or 4 years for me to really start to like this. Now, this has masterpiece status. A fantastic album. I don't think it's not my personal Jethro Tull favorite, but I can see why so many people love this album now. This is such a masterpiece of an album. So that's how that story came about. It's just funny, I went from actually detesting it to actually loving it, and that's just how it goes with me sometimes. And the last album on this list is one that's currently doing battle in the Forward Champion. And the results of that, of course, will be this Thursday. Who's going to win it? I'm not quite sure. I have my opinions of what it might happen. But we're talking about this one, Crime of the Century. Now, I loved Breakfast in America right away. It was, for me, one of the best albums of 1979, as you know, because you've watched my series, right? But I didn't like this one right away. In fact, I thought, is this really the same band? And I just found this really bluesy, and I didn't like any of the tunes, even the two radio stuff that I used to hear all the time, which are Bloody Well Right and School. I don't really care too much for either of them. I didn't like Bloody Well Right at all. a school I could kind of tolerate a bit. But that was it. I didn't have any interest in buying this album. I never owned it in vinyl. I never had it in cassette. First time I got it was maybe 25 years ago, when actually, it might not even have been that long ago. It might have been right around the time my daughter was born. I had a couple of days where I wasn't doing anything, and I was somewhere, and there was this one, Crisis, What Crisis, and Even in the Quietest Moments, because I already had Breakfast in America. I had it in vinyl originally, and then I got it again immediately in CD. So I bought all three of them, and I thought, okay, people keep telling me this is their best album. You gotta have this album. You gotta listen to this album. So I gradually started to listen to it. And lo and behold, after about a year or so of listening to this, I said to myself, there's no bad songs on this album. It started out with me liking School and Bloody Well Right, like most people usually do. And then I liked Dreamer as well. And then I gradually got into Crime of the Century. I even liked Rudy, which I thought was a kind of a quirky song. But the song that really sank this album for me was Hide in Your Shell. I thought that song relates too much to my school years. Anyways, now I love this. The sound on here is fantastic. I love the album cover. I'm not really sure what's going on back here, but so I've grown to love this album. And it's probably, I don't know, it's probably maybe my favorite Supertramp album now. Maybe, but it wasn't in the day. Didn't like it at first. Kind of grew on me a little bit at a time. I think it's because I was comparing it to Breakfast in America, and they were just completely different sounding to me. And I just wasn't into this. And anyways, that's it. That's the 5 albums that I once detested or disliked. And over time, I gradually fell in love with all of them. Supertramp's Crime of the Century, Jethro Tull's Aqualung, Led Zeppelin 3. I love all these little pictures too. I always like that. The Doors' Debut, and of course Boston's Debut. And I know some people will find it hard to believe that I didn't like any of these albums at first, but you had to know what I was like as a young person. I was really much into that hard rock scene. Hard rock, some heavy metal, a little bit of prog. And if I didn't like the initial listen to your album, I would listen to it. And not always listen to the whole thing. I'd listen to a couple tracks on it, and I'd say, nah, crap. And that, I was so close-minded about stuff. It's amazing I survived my childhood. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did doing it. So next week, we're going to do kind of the opposite here, but it's a little bit different. So I'm going to pick, I've already kind of picked them, but I've got 5 albums that I used to absolutely love. I love them all to the point where I played them all, like wore them out playing them so much. But now, in recent years, especially for some of them, more so than others, but I've grown not to hate them. I don't hate any of them. They just haven't aged well with me. Like they were such phenom albums, and now I could care less about them. And there's about, and some of them you'll find strange too, but we'll do that next week. Anyways, I hope you'll be interested in hearing that. And if you like this episode, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscription button. And hit the bell if you want to be notified of this content. Also, if you have any comments about any of the albums or anything I've said, or if you've got a story about the albums, that would be better. Any story about these albums that, maybe something I've said is kind of flashed back in your memory. Said, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that. Or maybe you have an album that's like that you want to tell your story. Put it in the comment section, please. I'd love to hear them. Anyways, I thank you for joining me tonight here on Favorites, and we will be back next Wednesday night with another Favorites album. So, another Favorites video, not album. Take care. Bye.